quieter you become, the more you hear, and what they start hearing in your silence is themselves. They're still talking, my friends, still posting, still gossiping, still spinning the story, but you've gone silent. And guess what? That silence, it's not weakness, it's power, it's proof. It's the final move in a game they didn't even know you stopped playing. They're still yelling into the void, trying to convince the world you're broken. But your silence, that's the sound of you winning. Before we dive deeper into this powerful truth, do yourself one favor. Press that like button and subscribe right now. Because if you've ever been made to feel like your silence means you've lost, this message will flip that lie on its head. You're not the one who's losing. You're the one who stopped explaining yourself to people who never deserved the truth in the first place. Hey folks, imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a storm, people yelling, wind howling, chaos all around. Everyone's pointing fingers, throwing shade, creating noise. But you zip up your jacket, look around, and walk out of the storm without a word. That's the kind of silence we're talking about today. Not passive, not weak, but decisive, strategic. The kind of silence that echoes, the kind that haunts. They keep talking because they think they're in control, but here's the truth they don't want to face. Silence shifts the power. It flips the script. It turns their performance into a mirror. And now every word they say reflects more about them than you. You're not in the scene anymore, and suddenly they're performing without an audience. And trust me, folks, nothing drives a person crazier than realizing the one they wanted to provoke isn't even watching. People think silence is running away. It's not. Silence is rising above. It's saying, I don't need to shout to prove I'm strong. Because when you're silent, you give them nothing to grab onto. No reactions, no drama. Just space. And in that space, their thoughts begin to eat them alive. That's the beauty of Stoic silence. It forces truth out of people who are hiding behind the noise. Let's break the lie right here. They told you, if you're silent, you must be weak, you must be hurt, you must be losing. But let me hit you with something stronger. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving people the tools to manipulate you. You took back your power the moment you chose silence over performance. You stopped playing defense. You walked off the battlefield and left them swinging at air. And here's the fun part. Watch what happens next. They'll keep talking to everyone else because they can't get to you. They'll create a fantasy version of what happened, twisting facts to make themselves feel better. But deep down, they know. They feel the shift. They feel the absence. And no matter how loud they get, they'll never drown out the sound of your silence echoing back every truth they didn't want to hear. My friends, real strength isn't proven by what you say. It's shown by what you no longer entertain. You're not here to debate your worth. You're not here to prove a thing. You've outgrown the room, the conversation, and the need to be understood by people who never tried to understand you in the first place. So here's what I want you to do right now. Drop this in the comments and make it yours. Silence wins wars. Say it loud. Type it bold. Let them read it from the shadows they now sit in. And while you're here, don't forget, like this video and hit that subscribe button, because what's coming next? It's going to peel back everything they never expected to face. Stay with me. Number 1. They still need an audience, you don't. Those who scream the loudest usually have the most to hide, but those who stay silent, they've already made peace with the truth. Let that one sink in, my friends, because right now, while they're still out there talking, spinning narratives, performing for attention, hunting for someone to co-sign their version of the story, you've gone silent, and they can't stand it. Why? Because silence starves them. Silence strips them of the only thing they were ever chasing, an audience. Imagine a stage. The curtains are drawn back, spotlights flashing. They step out, ready to perform. But when they look up, you're not there. No claps, no camera, no response, just empty seats and echoes. That's what your silence does. You left the theatre, you stopped watching the show, and now they're left dancing for ghosts. At first, they'll laugh it off. They're just quiet because they're hurt. They're pretending not to care. That's what they'll tell themselves. But the truth gnaws at them, because deep down they know. You've outgrown the need to prove anything, and that's what terrifies them. You see, people like that, they feed off reaction. They need you to respond so they can twist your words into another scene in their one-person drama. They thrive on pulling your strings, watching you dance, defending yourself, explaining yourself, crying, raging, overthinking. But when the puppet cuts its own strings, the show falls apart. Some of you might be wondering right now, but if I stay silent, won't they win? Won't they control the story? That's the fear they planted in you. That's the lie you've been told, that silence equals surrender. But here's the truth. You win the moment you stop giving them access to your energy. You win when you stop performing for people who clapped when you fell. You win when your silence becomes the one sound they can't drown out. Let me tell you something about those who talk too much. They're not strong. They're scared. Their words are smoke bombs, used to hide from the reflection in the mirror. And you? You became the mirror. You didn't throw shade. You didn't lash out. You just walked away. And now they're left staring at themselves in the silence you left behind. They need an audience because they don't know who they are without being watched. They need followers to validate their lies. But you've found something they'll never have as long as they keep talking. Peace. That deep, unshakable calm that comes from knowing the truth and no longer needing to shout it. That's not weakness. That's spiritual power. Think of it like this. They're stuck in a carnival, ringing bells, throwing tantrums, yelling through megaphones. You used to be in there with them, trying to be heard, trying to make sense of it. But now you've stepped outside. The noise is still blaring, but it's distant. And every step you take in silence, it's a step toward your own freedom. And their desperation grows louder. They're still trying to make the world believe you're the problem. But folks, they can't even convince themselves. That's why they're still talking, because without your reaction, they're stuck with their own echo. And that echo? It sounds a lot like guilt. It's not easy, though. Let's be real about that. Choosing silence takes more strength than shouting ever will, because silence means sitting with your own thoughts. Silence means facing your pain instead of throwing it at someone else. That's why so many people run from it. That's why they keep talking, to avoid the sound of their own soul. You'll be tempted to respond, to defend yourself, to say, that's not what happened. But ask yourself this. What do you gain by replying to someone who only listens to reply, not to understand? What do you win by feeding a fire that only wants to burn you? You don't owe anyone your voice, especially not people who twisted it in the past. You don't need to explain your growth to those committed to misunderstanding you. And you sure as hell don't need to be an audience member to someone else's self-deception. So here's what I want you to remember. True power doesn't need validation. A lion doesn't explain why it walks alone. A mountain doesn't shrink when someone says it's too tall. And you don't need to prove your worth to people who were never looking with honest eyes to begin with. They're still talking. Let them write the scripts. Let them rehearse the lies. Let them gather their crowd. Because you've got something far more rare. Inner silence that speaks louder than any spotlight ever could. So if you're watching this and you've been silent, stay there. Stay powerful. Stay calm. Don't lower yourself just to be heard by someone who never really listened. Your silence is not invisibility. It's elevation. It's self-respect. It's proof that you no longer need the room they keep performing in. Now here's what I want you to do. Drop this in the comments like you mean it. I don't need an audience. Say it for yourself. Say it for those watching. Say it so the universe hears it and starts matching your silence with strength, not setbacks. Number 2, silence doesn't mean you lost. It means you outsmarted them. Never underestimate the power of the one who says nothing. Their silence holds everything they don't want you to hear. That's the part they never tell you. That's the twist no one prepares you for. Because in a world that keeps screaming louder, we've been trained to believe that silence equals weakness. That if you're not clapping back, you've accepted defeat. That if you're not defending yourself, you must be guilty. But let me break that lie right here, right now. Silence doesn't mean you lost. It means you played smarter. It means you saw the game, understood the rules, and chose to walk off the board. Picture this. They're swinging wildly in a boxing ring, fists flying, breathing heavy, throwing accusations like punches, narrating your every move, feeding off drama like it's oxygen. But you've already left the ring. You're not even watching. They're fighting a ghost. And that's silence. That's not retreat. That's dominance. You see, silence is what happens when you've said everything that needed to be said. And now you're letting the consequences speak. They're still in denial, still waiting for you to return to the arena, still thinking that if they talk enough, accuse enough, twist enough, you'll step back into the chaos. But you won't, because you've finally realized the greatest flex is disappearing with your dignity intact. And yet in that silence, questions arise, not in you, but in them. Why aren't they responding? Why aren't they defending themselves? Why are they so calm? And that, my friends, is when the unraveling begins. Because the ego hates silence. The ego feeds off noise, off argument, off reaction. Your silence becomes their anxiety. Their mind starts doing the job you used to do, answering questions, explaining intentions, spinning the story. But now there's no response, no validation, no fuel, just space, just them and their own echo. Some people will mistake your silence as emotional shutdown, others will call it pride, some will say you're bitter. But let's call it what it really is, powerful emotional control. You're not cold, you're calculated, you're not suppressing, you're ascending, you're not afraid to speak. You've just realized not everyone deserves access to your truth. And the people who once took your voice for granted, they're the ones who panic the most when it disappears. There's a reason Stoic philosophy centers around control over reaction. It's not about becoming robotic or detached. It's about not letting fools drag you into emotional traps disguised as conversations. It's about knowing that what you don't say often reveals more strength than what you do. Because when you stop defending yourself, you stop inviting disrespect disguised as discussion. You outsmarted them the moment you understood the game was rigged, that no matter how honest you were, how calm, how patient, they were never listening, just waiting for a flaw, a word, a crack they could twist into ammunition. But now you've robbed them of the one thing they counted on, your participation. That's what hurts them the most. Not the silence itself, but the fact that they have no control over it. They can't mute it, they can't argue with it, they can't win against it. Silence isn't passive, it's checkmate. And I know some of you feel the weight of it. That urge to break the silence, to finally say what they need to hear, to set the record straight, to stand up and scream, "You're lying about me." But here's the thing, the truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs time. And time, my friends, always sides with silence, because lies burn fast. But truth lingers, and your silence will turn into the loudest truth they'll ever face. So, hold the line. Stay in your stillness. Let the noise die down on its own. Let the storytellers lose their breath. Let them chase shadows while you move toward the light. And while they spiral in speculation, you walk in clarity. While they perform, you prepare. While they react, you rebuild. Your silence is not void. It is vision. It is space you've created to breathe, grow, and reclaim your power. And while they may never admit it, deep down they know. They've already lost the moment you stopped showing up for a war you never asked for. So drop it in the comments if this is your energy now. Silence is strategy. Let them wonder, let them talk. But you're walking away with the only victory that matters. Peace. Stay with me. What's coming next will show you what happens when your silence becomes the storm they never saw coming. Number 3, they're trying to control the narrative, but you own the truth. Those who fear the truth will always try to rewrite it, but those who live it don't have to speak at all. You know what they hate the most? That you're quiet, that you're not arguing, that you're not running around trying to fix the version of the story they're selling to everyone who'll listen, because the more silent you are, the more desperate they become to fill the silence with their own fiction. They're trying to control the narrative, folks, rewriting events, swapping roles, turning villains into victims and calling it their side of the story. But here's the thing, truth doesn't need a PR team. It doesn't need hashtags or campaigns or crowd approval. It doesn't rely on sympathy. Truth is quiet. It sits in the dark. It waits. And eventually, it rises. They thought your silence meant they had the upper hand, that they could speak for you, paint you however they wanted. And maybe at first people believed it. Maybe you even wondered if you should break your silence just to set the record straight. But deep down, you knew it would be a waste, because anyone who's willing to believe lies without questioning the source was never interested in the truth to begin with. And that's what makes silence powerful. Not just that it protects your peace, but that it exposes the truth without you lifting a single finger. The more they talk, the more they reveal themselves, their bitterness, their guilt, their desperation. You don't have to defend yourself when their own actions start writing the ending they tried to avoid. Imagine this. They're standing in front of a whiteboard trying to draw a picture of you, adding lies, erasing facts, sketching new versions of the past. But behind them, there's a mirror, and everyone watching can see that the story on the board doesn't match the person in the mirror. That's what happens when you stop talking and start embodying. They perform, you reflect, and truth always shines brighter than performance. Still, it's tempting, isn't it? To jump in, to yell, "That's not what happened," to defend yourself, to expose receipts. But here's the hard truth, my friends. Narratives built on lies are designed to collapse. They're built on sand, not stone. So let them build, let them dig, let them write their stories. Because your life, your growth, your peace will tell the real one. They may control the volume, but you control the substance. What they say is noise. What you live is fact. And the people who truly matter, those with eyes to see and hearts to feel, they'll sense the difference. They'll recognize real when they see it. Because while they're out there performing, you're out here evolving. And if you've ever worried, but what if people believe them? Pause for a second and ask yourself this. Why would I want to defend my truth to someone who's more entertained by fiction? Why fight to be understood by those who've already made up their minds? It's like arguing with someone who only listens so they can respond, not understand. So you stop showing up to the trial. You let them sit in their courtroom arguing with ghosts. Meanwhile, you're out building your future, creating something so undeniable that even their loudest lie can't silence the reality of who you are becoming. Here's the irony. They wanted you to react, to speak, to argue, because in their mind that would give them the spotlight, that would keep you tangled in the mess. But you starved their ego when you walked away. You became untouchable when you stopped trying to rewrite the script they handed you and started writing your own. This is where the narrative crumbles. When people start to ask, if they were really the problem, why are they the only one growing? Why does their silence feel like strength, while the other one keeps trying to convince us they're okay? Because truth has gravity, and eventually even the lightest lie gets pulled down into it. So hold your ground, let them have the stage, let them sell their fantasy, but you're living reality. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need to post paragraphs to prove your side. You just need to keep becoming the version of yourself that makes their story look ridiculous in hindsight. And when it's all said and done, the ones who doubted you will come back, not for your explanation, but for your example. So if you're feeling this energy right now, drop it in the comments. Truth doesn't beg. Say it, own it, show it to yourself. Because silence isn't just power, it's proof. And what's coming next? We're about to explore how your silence becomes the weapon they never saw coming. Stay with me. Number 4, they can't heal if you're not bleeding. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that let them feel powerful. That's the uncomfortable truth, my friends, the one that hits like ice water to the soul. They weren't drawn to your strength. They were addicted to your vulnerability, to your emotional reactions, to your endless explaining, your defending, your rescuing. They weren't comforted by your presence. They were comforted by the fact that you were always bleeding and still stayed. But now you've gone quiet. You've stopped reacting. You've stopped hurting publicly. You've stopped bleeding for someone who kept slicing the same wound open just to see if you'd still show up bandaged and smiling. And suddenly, they can't heal because your pain was their medicine and your silence is now the sickness they can't cure. This is what happens when people mistake your empathy for weakness. They feed off your apologies. They build their self-worth on how many times they could break you and watch you crawl back. They don't call it control, they call it connection. But it was never connection, it was dependency. And your silence, your stillness, it snapped the cord. Now they're spiraling because they never actually learned how to deal with their guilt. They just kept projecting it onto you, making you the villain in a story where they wrote the plot and refused to take responsibility for the ending. And as long as you were emotionally engaged, even if you were hurt, even if you were angry, they felt safe. Because they were still relevant. They were still the center of your attention. But now, you're gone. Not just physically, energetically, spiritually. You've reclaimed every drop of power you used to bleed out trying to make things work. And without your energy, their wounds are exposed. Their guilt has no home. Their shame has no filter. Your silence doesn't just speak, it stings. And this is the part they didn't prepare for. Because deep down, they always believed you'd never leave for good. That you'd always come back when they needed validation, when they needed forgiveness, when they needed to feel like they mattered again. They assumed your loyalty was eternal, even if their effort never was. But now that you've detached, now that your absence is louder than your presence ever was, they're left sitting in the empty space where your pain used to perform for them. You're no longer bleeding, and now they can't bandage their ego. That's what this really is. They don't want you healed. They want you hooked. They want you angry. They want you to text them paragraphs. They want to hear that their name still burns in your chest, because that tells them they still have a place there. That tells them they still matter. But you've taken a different path. You've chosen to heal without a witness, and that terrifies them, because healing in silence is power they can't touch. It's transformation they can't track. They can't play the game if you're not showing up to the field. They thought detachment meant you'd become cold, but it didn't. It meant you finally became clear. And that clarity, that's what haunts them now, because now they have to sit with the truth they used to drown out with arguments, with drama, with attention. And the truth is this: they never had real control. They had access, and you revoked it. So when they say you've changed, agree with them. Say, yes, I've healed. And that version of me, the one who stayed silent while being hurt, the one who over-explained, the one who waited to be chosen, that version is gone, buried in the silence you thought meant surrender. You've risen from it, and now they can't find you in the places they used to provoke you. And here's what I want you to affirm right now. Drop this in the comments and make it a declaration. They lost their power when I stopped bleeding. Say it for yourself. Say it for every silent warrior who's choosing to heal without giving the enemy a show. Because this story, it doesn't end with your pain, it begins with your peace. And next, we'll go even deeper. Because if you think silence was the final weapon, wait until you see how it becomes the mirror they can't escape. Stay with me. Number 5. Noise is a mask. Silence is a mirror. When someone talks too much about you, they're trying to outrun the reflection you left behind. That's what most people miss. They think the loud ones are confident, in control, at peace. But more often than not, noise is just a disguise. A shaky, desperate cover-up for the things they're trying to hide. Not from you, but from themselves. And the moment you go silent, that disguise starts to crack. They're not really talking to others. They're talking to the mirror you left hanging in front of them. Every exaggerated story, every backhanded comment, every smug joke they make about you, it's not a message to the world. It's a message to themselves, a desperate attempt to avoid the truth echoing in your absence. Your silence doesn't sit quietly in the corner. It reflects. It forces people to face the weight of what they did, who they became, and what they lost. That's the power of stillness. It doesn't chase, doesn't confront, doesn't beg. It just shows. And when someone's been running from who they really are, a mirror is more terrifying than any argument ever could be. You're not even there anymore, and yet, somehow, they keep talking about you. Isn't that funny? You've removed yourself from the picture, but they're still drawing your outline in every conversation. Why? Because they're haunted, not by what you said, but by what you didn't, by what you refuse to say now, because silence doesn't offer them anything to argue with. It leaves them face to face with themselves. It's in those quiet moments, when the party's over, when the lights go down, when the mask slips, that the truth begins to creep in. When they're lying awake at night, scrolling through distractions, looking for anything to validate their version of events, but finding nothing, because deep down, they know. You were never the villain. You were the mirror. You showed them who they were, and they couldn't stand the sight of it. You used to speak. You used to explain. You used to pour your heart out, hoping they'd understand. But now, you've chosen a different kind of communication, the kind that doesn't require words, the kind that doesn't beg for clarity. You've become a reflection, one they can't control, can't edit, can't silence. And let's be honest, folks, that's why they keep making noise. It's not about you anymore. It's about them trying to out-talk their guilt, their shame, their regret. If they can convince enough people, maybe, just maybe, they can convince themselves that they did nothing wrong. But guilt doesn't work that way. It doesn't get quieter when you yell. It gets louder when you're alone. That's why silence is feared, because it doesn't coddle, it doesn't debate, it doesn't bend, it just stands still and reflects. And that stillness, that's when the lies start to collapse, not with drama, not with explosions, but with quiet, creeping awareness. So when they tell people you've changed, they're right. You have changed. You've stopped talking to walls. You've stopped dancing for people who only showed up to watch you fall. You've stopped watering weeds, hoping they'd grow into flowers. And now? Now they're standing alone in a field of silence, looking for someone to blame for the garden they neglected. You no longer need to explain the story, because you're living the truth. You no longer need to chase validation because your peace speaks louder than their performance. And while they keep shouting into empty rooms, you've moved on to build a life so solid it doesn't need defense. That's the paradox of silence. They'll think it's passive, but it's the most active thing you've ever done. It's not that you're gone, it's that you've become untouchable. Not because you're cold, but because you're clear. And that clarity reflects back everything they were trying to hide behind the noise. So here's your reminder. You don't need to speak to be understood. Not by people who never listened, not by people who feared your voice when it was honest, and certainly not by those who only showed up when your pain made them feel powerful. You've graduated. You're not part of the performance anymore. You've become the truth that doesn't need applause. And that's what they'll carry with them, long after the crowd leaves, long after the noise fades, long after the mask no longer fits. So drop this in the comments like a truth bomb. Silence reveals everything. Say it. Own it. Because the mirror is no longer yours to hold. It's theirs now. And the reflection, that's on them. Stay with me, because the echoes of your silence are just beginning to shake their world. Number 6. The echo chamber collapses without you. You don't need to raise your voice to shatter their illusion. Just leave the room and listen to how fast the echo dies. There's something eerie about an echo when no one's there to respond to it. It bounces, it lingers, it fades into itself. And that's exactly what starts to happen when you finally remove yourself from the conversation, from the chaos, from the loop they kept dragging you into. Because make no mistake, what they had wasn't dialogue, it was performance. And you were the main character they couldn't stop talking about. But now that you've walked away, the echo chamber they built starts collapsing, not with a bang, but with silence. They used to speak louder when you were silent because they needed your attention to feel powerful. They needed your reactions to validate their ego. They created conflict to stay relevant in your mind. It was never about resolution. It was about keeping you in orbit, close enough to control, distant enough to deny. But now you're not orbiting anymore. You've stopped circling the same arguments, stopped explaining your heart to people who twisted it into entertainment. And the second you stepped out of the pattern, they panicked. Because the story doesn't work without your role. The lines don't land without your presence. They can scream, shout, accuse, defend, but all of it is just noise ricocheting off walls. There's no more audience. There's no one left to play the part they rehearsed for. You were the gravitational pull that kept the drama spinning, but when you detached, you collapsed their galaxy. And now they're floating in a void of their own making, still trying to talk to someone who no longer exists in that space. It's wild, isn't it? How someone can be so loud when you're quiet. How their stories grow more elaborate the longer you stay silent. But look closely, are they really talking about you? Or are they just trying to drown out the guilt creeping up behind them? Because silence has a way of turning up the volume of your own conscience. They'll say you ghosted them, you gave up, you turned cold, that you were never real to begin with. That's the script they fall back on when they realize they've lost access to the version of you that stayed too long. But here's what they'll never admit. They miss the you that showed up, that explained, that cried, that begged to be heard. That's the version they're trying to summon with their noise, and that version doesn't live here anymore. They didn't expect your silence to last this long. They thought it was a phase. They thought eventually you'd break and come running back to clarify, to confront, to re-engage. But instead, you got quieter, stronger, harder to reach. You stopped needing to win the argument because you realized the only battle worth fighting was the one inside yourself, and you already won it by letting go. The echo chamber isn't just collapsing, it's imploding. Because now, every time they speak your name, it bounces off emptiness. Every time they try to drag you back into the mess, all they get is the sound of their own desperation. And the people watching? They notice. Maybe not at first. Maybe they were fooled by the performance. But over time, the pattern speaks louder than the words. They start to wonder, why are they still talking about someone who's clearly moved on? Why does the silence feel more stable than the noise? And little by little, the mask slips. The volume doesn't hide the cracks anymore. Here's the truth. You were the peace they didn't know how to keep. You were the clarity they weren't ready to face. And now that you're gone, all they're left with is the echo of what they ruined. So let it collapse. Let the noise die out. You don't need to run back to explain what your absence already revealed. They built the echo chamber to make you feel small, but now it's just a hollow space reflecting back their own mistakes. Drop this in the comments right now like you mean it. I walked out, and the noise fell apart. Say it loud. Say it proud. You are no longer a part of the game. You've outgrown the script. And what comes next? It's not just silence. It's sovereignty. Stay with me. The story's about to shift even harder. Number 7. You win when you stop explaining. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment they start explaining you to themselves, and that's when the panic begins. You've spent so much time justifying your heart, explaining your choices, clarifying your silence, trying to be understood by people who never really wanted to understand. They just wanted to control the narrative. They asked for honesty but twisted it into guilt. They asked for communication but used your words as weapons. And now, you've stopped, not because you're cold, but because you've outgrown the need to be heard by ears that only listen when it serves them. You win, my friend, not when they finally say, you were right, not when they come crawling back with apologies. You win the moment you choose not to explain a single thing anymore, because your truth doesn't need translation, and your worth doesn't need a witness. Explaining yourself is a form of pleading. It says, please see me clearly, please know my heart, please understand I never meant harm. But the hard truth is, some people don't want clarity, they want control. And the more you try to explain, the more they twist the meaning, change the rules, flip the story, until you don't even recognize the version of yourself they're attacking. But when you stop, when you refuse to explain your silence, your distance, your evolution, that's when the mirror turns. That's when the story they created starts to fall apart. Because without your participation, the performance collapses. Imagine this, a courtroom where they're the judge, the lawyer, the witness, and the jury, all arguing a case against you. But you never show up, you never argue, you never plead your side, and soon the courtroom gets quiet. Because there's no trial without a defendant, there's no show without a co-star. That's what your silence does. It shuts down the performance. They will start talking for you. They're probably bitter. They must be guilty. They were never really loyal. But the truth, it's showing in their desperation. Because silence removes their ability to gaslight you. It takes away the oxygen their ego needs. And that's when they start to feel the weight of your detachment. The lie was that you owed them an explanation. That closure was something you had to give. But here's what Stoic philosophy knows. You don't owe clarity to those who created confusion. You don't owe closure to the person who slammed the door. And you don't owe understanding to anyone who made a sport out of misunderstanding you. Let them wonder. Let them replay the story in their heads. Let them create theories and versions that make them feel better. While they do that, you walk forward, quietly, powerfully, without turning around. They'll say you've changed, and they're right, because the old you would have written paragraphs, defended your honor, begged to be seen. But the new you, the healed you, you don't chase understanding anymore. You embody it. Every step you take in silence proves what no explanation ever could, that you are no longer available for small conversations, that you are no longer accessible to those who shrink you, that your growth is no longer up for debate. They can tell the world whatever story helps them sleep at night. You're not here to argue. You're not here to correct. You're here to live. And that alone is the greatest victory. So right now, if this is hitting deep, I want you to affirm it in the comments. I stopped explaining. I started evolving. Say it. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that your energy is no longer for sale to anyone who doesn't honor it. And if this message carried your truth, carried your silence, carried your power, share it. Not just with a friend, but with the version of you who once needed this reminder. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this isn't the end. It's the beginning of something unshakable. This channel exists to remind you, you're not alone in your silence, and you're not weak for walking away. You're powerful beyond words, and it's time the world heard the message you chose never to speak. This was your silence. This was your win, and it echoed louder than any scream ever could.